Buenos días, buenas tardes, y buenas noches. Bonjour, bonsoir, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be. Jay Slater case, let's get rolling. For this one, I just want to focus on Shane Yerrill. Shane Yerrill. I was going to do a Sunday roast of Shane Yerrill, but decided not to because it seems like I don't know the guy and I don't know much about the guy. Seems like he is pretty good guy because he is a fundraiser. When I looked him up, Shane Yerrill, through the Fight Foundation is his organization, and it's done a lot of, it seems to me, good humanitarian work. So on the surface, Shane Yerrill is a good guy. If you don't know who Shane Yerrill is, it seems he is a big ally of Debbie Duncan, that he's out there supporting Jay's petition and very much on Debbie Duncan's side, which means to me, we may well have with Shane Yerrill an example of a well meaning person who either is not bright enough to figure out what is going on with the Debbie Duncan situation, or he knows exactly what's going on and he's, for whatever reason, posing as some kind of charlatan here. So I'll let you decide that. His name has come up because, now, first of all, I want to mention he's a friend. Shane Yerrill is a friend of Debbie Duncan's. And the first question I want to throw out today is anyone that claims to be a friend of Debbie Duncan, who obviously didn't know Debbie Duncan before the Jay Slater death, how is it that such people become friends with Debbie Duncan? I'm very curious to know how you go from not knowing the mother of a victim to becoming a friend of that person. You see, we had this with Isla Traqueir as well. She said she had spent time with Debbie Duncan and become friends. Karen Morin, Kaz Alice, as far as I know, didn't know Debbie Duncan before the death of Jay Slater, also a friend of Debbie Duncan. I'm curious about this. Obviously, these friendships don't date back to school years or anything like that. And I think I'm right in saying these friendships with Debbie Duncan all have happened in the last 2 years. But how and why? Does Shane write to Debbie and say, I want to be your friend? Does Shane say, I'm on your side and therefore we could become friends? Just curious how, in such a short period of time, people that are total strangers become friends over the death of a person who died in very mysterious circumstances. Just, I do find it a little odd. But anyway, back to Shane Yerrill through the Fight Foundation. Now, he's mayor of Waltham Abbey, and that apparently is some kind of qualification for being trustworthy. But I doubt that. So let me just base what I'm going to say on what I just read on Marvin's channel, Streamline Entertainment. And many thanks, Marvin, for all your support with my presence on YouTube, my TikTok videos, and all the rest of it. So much appreciate what you're doing there, Marvin. But this one caught my eye when I was listening to Marvin go through some comments on his channel. And it comes from someone called Aussie Rover 1982, someone I believe who claims to be from Oswald Twistle. And this person said, in regards to Debbie Duncan, he said, or she said, there's no Porsche sat on the drive. And I take that to mean, no one in the Duncan Slater family has made any great amounts of money. There's no Porsche sat on the drive. Well, that may be so. There may not be one naughty boy boat parked in Ivor Lovelace's backyard, but there may be two or three parked around the corner in someone else's backyard. So I'm not sure what Aussie Rover's point is there about no Porsche sat on the drive. She's still working, and his dad is still a window cleaner. So Debbie's still working, and Warren is still a window cleaner. That's interesting because I thought Debbie was not working. I thought because of her nervous breakdown, she had to leave working as the school finance officer. That was what I thought. But this local person, who claims to be local, says Debbie's still working. And I didn't think Warren was a window cleaner. I thought he was a gas fixture maintenance person. I don't know. I thought he worked for a gas company, but apparently he's a window cleaner. Again, you might think that's no bearing on anything, but if at this point we still don't know exactly what Warren does, what Debbie does, I find that a little strange too. This person, Aussie Rover 1982, in Marvin's comments goes on, the coroner had a verdict of no malpractice. That is not true. That is not true. Let me correct that one, Aussie Rover. The coroner, Dr. James Adderley, issued his verdict that Jay Slater's death was accidental. Now, as Adderley went through how he arrived at that verdict and other factors involved, Adderley explained that he saw no evidence of third-party involvement. That's not malpractice. Not at all. Malpractice is usually in medical cases, isn't it? Doctors, etc. So when you say the coroner had a verdict of no malpractice, he didn't. The verdict was accidental death with no evidence of third-party involvement. But keep in mind, as Adderley said, he has to base his findings or his verdict on the evidence presented in court. We all know there's a whole load of evidence out there that never came to court. Heavens above, in the first inquest, only 1 out of 6 key witnesses appeared. So obviously the evidence was lacking to a bizarre degree in the first part of the inquest. Inquest part 2, we still had 2 absolutely key witnesses that refused to show up. Now, to me, 2 witnesses that refused to show up, yeah, that's evidence that something ain't right. You would have thought they would be more than happy to be there if this were an accident. But they weren't. They refused to show up. So what I'm saying is, Adderley is right in that he can only go by the evidence presented in court. But if the evidence presented in court is very limited, then his verdict of, I don't see any evidence of third-party involvement, isn't very convincing. The answer to that is, yeah, because the evidence presented in your court was minimal. If you look at the whole picture of things, the evidence that comes from outside of your court as well, Adderley, you'll see there's many, many indications of third-party involvement. Let's get back to what Aussie Rover 1982 said. Aussie Rover says the management of the fund, this is where we're getting back to Shane Yerrill here. The management of the fund, that's the GoFundMe that Lucy set up for Debbie, the management of the fund was one of the country's leading fundraisers. A man who restores your faith in humanity if you ever meet him. The mayor of Waltham Abbey, Shane Yerrill. Somebody who would ensure money goes to the right places. Now, the fact that Shane Yerrill is a mayor doesn't give me any great confidence that he knows where any money has gone at all, or if he is, I didn't know this, if he is someone in charge of managing the GoFundMe money, it doesn't give me any faith at all just because he's a mayor that he's done the right thing and he knows what's happening with this money. Just because you're a mayor doesn't mean you're a good person. We already have in the Jay Slater case the former mayor of El Tanque in Tenerife, a certain Roman Antonio Martin Canabes, I think his full name is. Disgraced mayor, can't hold public office for 24 years, I believe. So if Aussie Rover's saying title of mayor equals you can trust me, I would say in the Jay Slater case, title of mayor equals can't trust the person at all. But the important point about Shane Yerrill here is if he is in some way, as Aussie Rover 1982 is implying, in charge of this GoFundMe, then why is it, if we can trust Shane Yerrill, and Shane can ensure that money goes to the right places, why is it that Shane hasn't taken 5 minutes to issue a statement detailing where every single penny of that GoFundMe has gone? This is very simple, Aussie Rover. If Shane Yerrill is to be trusted, why doesn't he just tell us where the money's gone? Why the big secret? Because to me, when the funds or the destination of the funds are kept secret, there's something going on. Debbie Duncan has had 2 years to explain where the money's gone, and so far all she said is, well, we work with GoFundMe and GoFundMe are pleased with what we've done. That doesn't explain where the money's gone. We have Aussie Rover, a local from Oswald Twistle, apparently saying, well, Shane Yerrill's in charge of the management of the funds. We can trust him. We can trust Shane Yerrill when he tells us where the money's gone. It's that simple. 2 years and no one can tell us where the GoFundMe money went. Now, we did have, of course, Rocky, interviewed by Glody, saying, look at this, here's a post on Facebook from Debbie Duncan saying 52,000 of the GoFundMe went to pay searchers. By the way, Debbie Duncan has never denied that. Never has. It's never come from Debbie's mouth that Facebook account was fake. It's never come from Debbie Duncan's mouth that claim is not true. She hasn't denied it. Neither has Shane Yerrill. So in the absence of any denial, I'm tempted to think that Rocky got that right. Because the silence on that one is deafening. So my call to Shane Yerrill is, if you've got this right, Shane, if you think Jay's law proposals are very good, then I think you should come out and explain why. Because you're backing someone, you've got this friend, Debbie Duncan, you're backing Jay's law petition, but as far as I can see, you haven't yourself actually explained why it's a good idea. We had this absolutely shocking moment on This Morning when the wet weasel, Ross Miller, I think his name is, backing up Debbie, said that it's a really good idea that social media platforms are compelled to remove videos and remove accounts of those that are saying anything negative. That was it. Anything negative about a grieving family. Now, Shane Yerrill, it seems, is on board with that. The mayor of Waltham Abbey wants to close down free speech because anyone who has anything negative to say about a grieving family, that needs to be censored. Is that right, Shane? That's what you believe? It's a very, very odd situation for a mayor to be in, to absolutely back restrictions on free speech. All right. I did want to quickly dip into the comments that are still flowing in, and it's a wonder to behold. Comments still flowing in under the 9-minute video that This Morning have put out there, and last night on Jan's Views Live, I did say that this is a very encouraging turn. For once, our side has a chance with mainstream media to express our take. And so many of the comments are rightfully challenging this absurd notion that we are trolls and that we are not trying to get to the truth. But there is one comment from a certain Thomas the Great that I want to pick up on here. Because, as always, Thomas the Great, who is not great, Thomas the Wanker is a more appropriate name for him, has got this badly wrong. Let's have a quick look. If we can find it. He talks about inconsistencies. Here we go. Thomas the Great says, inconsistencies are normal in the accounts of people who are in a stressful situations. They're expected. Now, he's talking about the likes of Lucy, Brad, I guess perhaps Ayub and the rest of them, giving accounts which are then later contradicted or found to be untrue. So rather than call them lies, Thomas the Great is calling them inconsistencies, because he is saying that these people under stress are saying things that aren't entirely accurate, and that's to be expected. First of all, let's correct his English here. Inconsistencies are normal in the accounts of people who are in a stressful situation. The word a must be singular, Thomas, so not situations, but a stressful situation. They're expected. My question, therefore, Thomas, is how do you tell the difference between a mere inconsistency made in a stressful situation and a lie? How do you distinguish the two? How would you know, for example, Lucy's statements are mere inconsistencies as opposed to lies? What is your method, Thomas, for distinguishing one from the other? If you have no method from distinguishing one from the other, why are you suggesting that what Lucy and the others said were just inconsistencies? Why aren't you saying they must be lies? Because if you're convinced, as it seems you are, that these are just inconsistencies, then explain why. Why do you take them as inconsistencies and not lies? Now, I'm going to explain why I take them as lies and not inconsistencies. In my experience, Thomas the Great, when someone has made a mistake, let's say in a stressful situation, they feel under pressure, they said something that turns out to be wrong, what normally happens, Thomas, is they correct themselves in moments when they've had time to de-stress, if you like. They realize what they've said is wrong and they correct themselves because they don't like false information out there. So, for example, in the last 2 years, if Lucy had made certain inconsistent statements, I would expect Lucy to correct that and say, you know what? I wasn't awoken by a phone call at 8 a.m. No, it was Brandon that actually called me first at 8:30, that I never had a phone call from Jay at that time. That's what I would imagine would happen to someone who had blundered into saying under stress something inconsistent. But we haven't had that, have we, Thomas? We've not had no retraction of these inaccurate statements. We've had no explanation from any of these friends that they're not lying, they just said stuff under stress. That's what makes me think, Thomas, they're lying, because they haven't taken it back. But again, as I say, Thomas, I'm very, very keen to hear why you think, or why you're sure, these are not lies told by anyone, but they are inconsistencies. You go on, Thomas. Those creators, and you're talking about, I guess, content creators like myself, Wax, Jan, you say those creators wouldn't be able to handle being interviewed, and we'd just have another no-show. People who troll online overwhelmingly have narcissistic tendencies, and people with narcissistic tendencies can't take being challenged whatsoever. So it would be an absolute car crash for you guys. Several things to unpack here. First of all, you say those creators wouldn't be able to handle being interviewed. Well, I think we have a track record of being able to handle being interviewed. Jan and myself were interviewed by Sonia Poulton, and Wax was interviewed by, I've forgotten his name, Elliot guy. I don't know, on a podcast that's pretty well known. Sean Elliott, maybe. Don't know. But it's the other way round, Thomas. We're fine with being interviewed. I think you'd be surprised how well we can handle being challenged. On the other hand, on your side, Thomas, none of you, not one of you, has ever had the courage, the backbone to be interviewed by one of us. So if you're talking about those with narcissistic tendencies, it's your side that obviously can't face ever being challenged voice to voice in an interview situation. If you could, and you knew you could make us look pathetic, inferior, you would accept, but you never do. Yeah, it would be an absolute car crash for you guys. But surely, Thomas the Great, that's what you want. Wouldn't you love, absolutely adore that moment when Max or myself or Jan or anyone on our side had an absolute car crash of an interview? Wouldn't you love that? Wouldn't you want that? Wouldn't that make your case even stronger? In which case, if you know an interview with us would be a car crash, why aren't you campaigning for that to happen? Why aren't you asking ITV, BBC, and any outlet, please interview these tragedy trolls? Because it's going to be a car crash and that will back up Debbie's claim. Why aren't you begging for that? That's a strange one, isn't it, Thomas? You know it'd be a car crash. You want that to happen, but you don't want it to happen because you ain't asking for it. Thomas says you need to rejoin the real world. It isn't going to be happening. Well, this is what I said on Jan's Views Live last night. I said, it looked like for so long it ain't gonna be happening. These 2 or 3 minutes when a so-called tragedy troll is actually interviewed by mainstream media, it looked for so long in Thomas's world that it ain't gonna be happening. It isn't gonna be happening. But the very fact that the Accident Group are in some kind of meltdown right now because the comments are open for the first time, when they're talking about Sky or any other mainstream media for the first time, you've got the comments open, they're flowing in, and people, many people are asking, are begging ITV to interview one of these so-called tragedy trolls. Thomas is saying it isn't going to be happening. If I were you, Thomas, I wouldn't bet a lot of money on that. I don't know for sure if we'll get the opportunity, but we're moving in the right direction. We have the comments open. We have a number of people begging ITV to give us a chance, the so-called tragedy trolls, to speak our minds. And yes, Thomas, we are more than happy to be challenged. We invite that. I've invited you from day one to challenge me voice to voice in an interview style, and you can't do it. So here you are saying we wouldn't be able to handle it, and I'm saying you can't even get the balls, find the balls to go ahead, put us on the spot, and see if you're right. All right, let's leave it there. Shane Yerrill, best friends with Debbie Duncan, but I don't see Shane Yerrill able to explain why Jay's Law is such a wonderful idea. All right, hasta luego, adios, hasta la próxima. See you next time.